So I was able to sit down with the neurodivergent doctor here, and I was able to pick his brain about a certain topic. What's one of the traits of autism or ADHD that's gotten you into trouble?
So have you ever been talking with someone who like has an accent and without you even trying, like you're suddenly finding yourself talking with the same accent too? Like, I mean, you're not trying to copy them and you're not making fun of them. You're just spontaneously have developed this accent like from Europe or some slightly southern drawl.
I've never done that, I don't think, but I noticed that there's a pro Counter-Strike player that is Canadian, and he moved to Europe for a couple years, and now he has a bit of European pronunciation on some of his words.
Okay, well, I'm not sure if this is what's going on with him, but this happens to me sometimes. Well, not in the European accent thing, but picking up on someone else's way of talking or accents. And this is why. And maybe this is, for the people watching, maybe this is about them also. The truth is, I do this, and so do millions of others. But if you're neurodivergent, you may be especially susceptible to a phenomenon called linguistic convergence. And what this is this is taking on someone's speaking style or their traits or their accents. Like, everybody does this, but it hits a little differently for people with ADHD or autism. So this can be a co-occurring condition that is often seen in those with ADHD or autism, and there's nothing wrong with it. So I really want to make a point there. There's nothing wrong with this. However, this is a trait that I'm trying to be more mindful of in myself because it's earned me some very strange looks in the past, and I'm not gonna lie, it's gotten me into a few situations in the past that were not super great for me. I believe people thought that I was mocking them in the past or patronizing them or others, and I really wasn't. I swear I was not like mocking anybody or trying to imitate them. So the reason people who do this, they need to know about this, it's because when it manifests in some circumstances, it can get a person into trouble from time to time if you're not careful.
So is the research on this with ADHD and autism, what does it say about it?
Well, there is, but I have not been able to find empirical research on linguistic convergence specifically related to autism or ADHD. There might be some out there, I just haven't found it yet. But from what I've studied, we can connect some information and clues together. So we'll try to do that here while we're talking, I guess.
Might be good for future research.
So like I was saying, linguistic convergence, or basically it's taking on someone's speaking style or traits or accents, etc. It's something that I do unintentionally, so I don't mean to do it. I did this when I talked to people in Texas. I did this when I was in Mexico. I did this after watching too many episodes of Justified. I've seen people do it after watching like Monty Python too much.
Oh yeah, I do this thing where after watching shows like Game of Thrones, when I talk to myself, I start using the same type of language as the characters use in the show, but my accent doesn't change at all.
No, I totally get it. No, I know, I do the same thing. So usually linguistic convergence is almost unnoticeable in most people, but for me, my brain doesn't have a great filter sometimes, and I'm rather impulsive as well. And stuff just starts like coming out of my mouth without me even knowing or trying. So it's an automatic process for me. Again, I'm trying to gain more control over this, better through self-monitoring and more introspection and you know, just really just being more aware of myself. Aren't we neurodivergent people supposed to just be us, right? Haven't we heard advocates like myself and other people saying, hey, just unmask? By the way, if you've ever heard me say just unmask, I will never say just unmask totally, because I feel like masking has a lot of value in certain situations, and it helps keep us safe in some situations as well. So unmask some areas, don't unmask in other areas. That's kind of the thing. But anyway, we're always being told, like, just be ourselves, just let it all hang out. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Like I said, we don't live in a world where it's always safe to completely unmask and just be ourselves all the time. We have to be judicious in how we unmask, because in the wrong context or situation, ADHD traits and autistic traits, hell, even anxiety and depression can put us in situations that can be pretty dangerous at times.
So, what does this look like for you?
Linguistic convergence for me sometimes sounds like I'm making fun of somebody, or I'm mimicking them, or at the very least just mirroring them. And some may have taken offense to that in the past. I'm not quite sure how often I've unintentionally offended others. And that puts me in a pretty vulnerable position sometimes because I don't always catch the social cues. I just know I have had people react in ways I didn't really understand at the moment. And then later on, I'll like be replaying it. You know how you do, you replay your social situations over and over again later, days later even, and something clicks. And then I'm like, oh my God, I understand that I probably offended that person 4 days ago at the Minute Mart or whatever. I don't know. So you would think that this linguistic convergence occurs when you hear someone talking a certain way, and then you just start like copying it because you're like just hearing it. But check this out. There's this researcher out there, Dr. Lacey Wade, conducted an experiment trying to determine under what circumstance linguistic convergence occurs. And the results suggested that people don't actually have to hear someone's accent or way of talking to unconsciously copy it or converge with it. Now, we, you, me, we may do it based on what we simply expect to hear from someone instead of what we actually hear from someone. You see what I'm saying? So check this out. So Dr. Wade figured this out with a super brilliant study using more than 100 people, which is not a bad sample size to work with, by the way. When I remember when I did my own human subjects experiment in my doctoral program, I struggled to even get 60 people to fully participate. So I can really appreciate a group size of 100.
You just got to pay them though.
Yes, you do have to pay them. You have to pay them. I think I gave them Amazon cards, I believe. Yeah, I think Taco Bell. Nah, I wouldn't have done that. That would have been like, I don't know. No, that wouldn't have worked. That would have dissuaded them from participating. Anyway, so Dr. Wade wanted to see if people who were not from the southern part of the U.S. So basically, that means people without a southern drawl would change the way that they pronounce the letter I in certain words and started pronouncing them like people from the southern part of the US do. So instead of time, it was Tom. What time is it? What time is it? Instead of dime, it's dom. Like 2 nickels make a dime. In this experiment, man, I'm doing a terrible job with that, I'm sure. So her hypothesis was that the people would change the way they pronounce those words with the letter I in them based on their expectations of what they think they will hear. So she designed a guessing game for them that would get them to say a whole bunch of I words with like no changes in their pronunciation. It would be like this US coin is small and silver and worth 10 cents and the answer is dime and so on. And that hard I was in there, dime. Then she had them answer more questions, but this time the questions were being asked by somebody with a southern accent. Pretty tricky, huh? So again, the questions didn't have the hard I in them, so the I was not demonstrated in the question itself. And if the people adopted that southern pronunciation, it would be because of what they expected to hear, probably based on like their experiences they've had and not based on what they actually heard at that time. So what she did is she recorded their speech and analyzed it using this thing called acoustical analysis, and found that people change their accents based on expectations and experience, probably, rather than actually hearing the samples. And thus we have linguistic convergence that occurred based on the expectations rather than modeling. But again, pretty much everybody does this, right? It's true. Like, it's not just the ADHDers or the autistic people who do this. Now, if you're a person who overly exaggerates your convergence, you would be doing what's called over-accommodation. But over-accommodation is much more than just like how a person pronounces their words. So here's an example. So I was at a hospital recently, and I was advocating for an autistic couple, a person who was admitted to stay there. So I was there to help her get her and her partner's needs better met by the medical staff. So one of my jobs was to go in and explain to the nurses and the doctors that my clients were autistic and help the nurses and the doctors better understand how my clients' autism presented, basically what types of autistic traits and what types of features they have and what they need from the medical staff who are serving them. These are two individuals who are extremely intelligent. They're successful in their businesses. They're very creative with a superb mastery of like the English language. They don't have any linguistic challenges whatsoever that I know of anyway. And the reason I was advocating for them was because they just needed the nurses and the doctors to quit coming in and making small talk at like 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., etc. And they needed to stop coming in and touching them and being like placing their hand on them and like trying to give that comforting feeling. And when they do come in to talk, they needed to like get to the point of what they were saying instead of just trying to come in and do mindless small talk and meaningless chat. And meandering around the subject that they were needing to get to. These people are smart. They know what's going on. Just like come in and just basically tell them what you need to tell them and then get out. That's really what they need to say. I got word from my clients that the doctors and the nurses started speaking to them rather strangely. And I thought this was weird. So I was like, okay, let's go see what that's about. So I went down to the hospital that next day to see what was going on. And what I witnessed was like, it would be what I would consider to be overcompensatory linguistic convergence. And I can only assume exaggerated linguistic convergence based on what the doctors and the nurses' expectations were, not what my clients were actually exhibiting. Again, when my clients communicate, they communicate just like most everyone else that they would expect to communicate would, possibly better. What I witnessed was that the medical professionals were speaking very slowly, like hardcore prolonged eye contact and silence, like I was uncomfortable. So they were like this, they'd be like, so we just want to make sure that you understand. Okay, what we're doing next. And then they'd like put their hand on or whatever. So yeah, it was really bad. So meltdowns ensued because this was really stressing them out.
So why do you think these medical professionals spoke like that to them?
I believe it was because that was their expectation of how to talk to an autistic person. They assumed that they needed to slow everything down and talk like they are 5-year-olds because autism, right? Or whatever the reason was. By the way, you probably already know this, but small talk is just like a way for people to communicate with each other to find out if like they're safe to interact with. And generally people try to figure this out quickly. So that's one of the purposes of small talk. So the doctors and the nurses expected my client's communication style to be a certain way based solely on them having a diagnosis of autism. But the medical professionals kind of came off as rude and offensive and patronizing. And there were layers of ableism thrown in as well. So yeah, when I spend time educating medical professionals, I try to find out what they know first. That way I don't try to explain what they already know. So I have a very limited amount of time and I want to get to the point quickly. I want to be efficient with their time as well. When I explain something about autism that challenges what they thought they knew about autism, I can see that they want to make that fit in with like their current understanding of it. But that can be difficult for a lot of professionals as well, and it can create some internal dissonance in them.
Talk a little bit more about internal dissonance.
So internal dissonance, this is something that occurs when somebody's presented with new information that challenges the information they've already accepted in their minds. However, I'm not looking to challenge the info these doctors have because it's probably right too for some autistic people. I'm trying to add to what they already know, and I'd like to provide them with a spectrum of information. So maybe they do know autism, but not as many presentations of it as I do, since this is something that I just work with on a daily basis. And there are millions of ways that autism presents in people. So I'll ask the viewers, how does linguistic convergence present in you? Just something to think about. Write that down if you wanted to. So when like talking to an elderly person in a wheelchair, like do you automatically talk aloud or like, hello, how are you today? There you go. So if you do that, that's like another version of linguistic convergence.
Oh yeah, like how about like when I'm talking to people my age, I use slang terms that my age group uses because I expect them to know what I mean. But versus when I'm talking to older people, I don't really use those same words.
Yeah. So no, that's really a good question. I've often asked myself this question that I got from an episode of Veronica Mars. Should I check myself before I wreck myself? Yes, I should. And I'm trying, like I'm constantly trying to check myself.
Okay. But why do we engage in linguistic convergence?
So there is a research, and his name is Paul Hegarty, and he suggests that linguistic convergence helped our ancient ancestors with safer travels and trade success and more things like that. I keep harping on the same thing, and that is survival. If you've seen my videos, I talk a lot about a lot of the traits that we have may be survival based. And the reason many of us do what we do, especially things we don't understand, is just for survival. Yes, survival back then meant fitting in with their tribe, with their kin, with their country folk, or whatever community that they had that was vital to their safety and ability to eat and stay safe. Survival is at the root of so many things that we do, even when we're not conscious of them. At an early age, I found that the way I did things, like autistic things, led me to be bullied. And where I grew up in North Portland, right? And there was serious potential for severe bodily harm to me in the form of getting my ass kicked, basically. I lived in fear almost every single day of my elementary and middle school experience, and some high school experience too. It got a lot better in high school because I used some of my talents to like get protected a little better. But I was a really small, skinny kid, and I had ARFID. If you don't know what ARFID is, I think I have a video on that. But anyway, how did I survive? I mean, I adapted quickly to those around me, like obsessively observing other people, picking up on the mannerisms of others, on their linguistic styles and everything, just in an effort to fit in and belong. And if I didn't, I would get picked on more. And it scared the hell out of me to think that I might end up like those other kids that I saw who were different and alone, those who got beaten up socially, physically, both at school and in the neighborhood. And basically, they didn't know how to mask very well. And I'm really, truly sorry that I didn't stick up for them as much as I probably should have until later on in life, and that sucks. But I'm really trying to stick up for people now. So I know you well enough to know you didn't really experience a whole lot of bullying growing up. I don't think, did you? Anyway, so to the viewers out there, did you experience a lot of bullying? Online bullying, bullying from parents, from teachers, from scout leaders, from religious leaders, YouTubers, online trolls? I don't know. There's just so many ways that we can get bullied nowadays that weren't even around when I was young. We'll find out that I think we'll all find out that there are far more of us out there that have experienced that specific type of hell, and that can provide a sense of community and belonging and support, and that really, like, I believe that makes a big difference in others, just knowing that there's others out there who experience something similar. I unconsciously took on the same accents and the words and the phrasings of those around me just to be accepted in different peer groups as much as possible. But it's in our nature to try to do things using less energy or resources. And this may be another one of those reasons why we use something like linguistic convergence.
How about you give us some examples?
Most of the states in the United States of America call those things we put our groceries in, we call them shopping carts. Now, in parts of the southern U.S., I lived over in North Carolina for a while, these are called buggies. So we call them shopping carts, they call them buggies. So if you move there, you would adopt the word rather quickly, a buggy, and it's just easier that way. It makes less effort to just call it a buggy, because others would question if you called it a cart or shopping cart. It also might draw like unwanted attention to you and make you stand out as not fitting in. And historically, again, like I was saying, fitting in often means survival. Not fitting in, not always a good thing, right? So same with pop. We call it pop. But so basically I'm talking about carbonated, flavored, sugared water. One part of the country calls this a pop, where I live. Another calls it a soda. Another calls it a Coke. They're like, I'll take a burger and fries and a Coke. And they're like, what kind of Coke? You're like, Pepsi. So we adapt and survive, hopefully to thrive. So ask yourself, like, what do we do to preserve cognitive energy? thinking takes like 25% of your body's energy. And we speak according to how we think somebody's going to talk even before they even open their yapping pie hole, with the intent of making the communication more efficient. So again, everybody engages in linguistic convergence. But are you so impulsive that you over-accommodate without thinking it through? And now you just look silly or sexist or racist or whatever, even if you're not. So impulsivity, which is a real big problem for a lot of people with ADHD, that can be very problematic. Also, if you're prone to making careless mistakes, difficulty organizing your thoughts and speech, and you have the tendency to like blurt things out, then you're also at risk for this. So, does that sound familiar to you? Okay, so somebody with social reciprocity differences or challenges in friendships or relationships, these things can make somebody highly motivated to keep their friends, and sometimes they unconsciously do this by converging with them in some way. That sounded dirty, didn't it?
What do you say to all those people that say it's just normal?
So yes, linguistic convergence is normal. If you're ADHD or you're autistic or both, then you just have to be aware of yourself and your possibility of overcompensatory or exaggerated convergence, and see if that helps your social game. I hope this helps you in your neurodiverse universe. Cheerio.